Next night is Purim, and we have our Purim presentation over at OCI. So you should find all the information you need about that on the website. But we will not be here next Wednesday, 1 week from tonight. We will instead meet Thursday night over at the OCI building for the Purim presentation. Also, tomorrow morning's warehouse move. A lot of you have gotten in touch with Mike Hoskins and let him know that you're going to be joining tomorrow. You're bringing your trucks and trailers and such. That's going to be 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And who's going to be your supervisor over there? Okay, so you're going to gather at Pathway first, right here, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., and Stephen Lane will then lead you to wherever everybody needs to go. Okay. Were you aware of that, Mr. Lane?
Just found out.
He just found out. Okay. But a further announcement involving that. At this time, there's not any cleaning needed. Mike was telling me of all the offers of all the different kinds of help he's gotten, and I'm so impressed. But I shouldn't be, because it's how our family just operates anyway. Everybody's always just willing to jump in and do whatever's needed. And in this case, some things that weren't even needed. So he's telling me that no cleaning is needed at this time. But just hang on, your turn's coming. There'll be plenty of other opportunities for that. But he really just needs those tomorrow that are able to lift large and heavy items. And if that's you, talk to Mike or be here tomorrow in the morning to meet with Stephen. And if it's not, just hang on. There's more opportunities later. But he said they do already have all of the trucks and trailers they need. So if you've not already talked to him about bringing a truck and trailer, then Mike, they don't need to bring any if they've not already talked to you, right? Okay, because what we don't want is a traffic jam and people trying to back trucks and trailers up and somebody running into or over somebody. So we don't want that. No dents, no boo-boos. Parking is going to be limited. So where they're taking everything. So if you're not in a truck hauling items, please carpool if at all possible. Did I cover everything, sir? Okay. Okay. Do you have anything to say? Pardon? Okay. Then without further ado, Mr. John Holsti. Yay!
Well, you haven't heard what I have to say yet, so. I want to tell everybody Shabbat Shalom, but that's out the window too, so Shalom. Anyway, I'm supposed to wait until I get the signal from the back to start my presentation here, but I was going to talk to you about questioning things and questioning the narrative that we're fed on a daily basis. It kind of goes with what Stephen, his remarks last week about prayer and about how, there we go, I think I can hit play now. Yes. About how sometimes the things that we've been doing for ages, maybe we need to re-examine that, The things that we've been praying, maybe even rotely, maybe we should put a little more meaning into it, examine it. And that's kind of what I want to tag off of tonight. Not necessarily the prayer aspect, but maybe what the world shows us a lot of times. So this is something that when I started putting it together, it started getting really deep, and there started to be a lot to it. So I cut it up into 2 sections, and maybe at some point, Bill, let me give section 2, but right now this is section 1. So here we go. Questioning the narrative, questioning the world. That's what we want to talk about right now. Why would we do that? Why do we need to question things? Yeah, see if it's true. Yeah, I think that becomes a little bit more important in these latter days. We're told that even the elect could be deceived, so this is a position we don't want to be in. So we need to guard our mind, guard our thoughts, and examine everything that we see and hear, because Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So I'm hoping to give you a little bit of insight into maybe a little peek behind the scenes. Look behind the curtain and see the great Oz running things here. And this is just from things that are freely available on the internet. All right. So, question everything, why? Well, that's what the kids always want to know, the kids that are about that tall. But why? Well, so we're not deceived. There's a lot of other reasons, but that's probably the biggest one. All right, so the parts that I want to talk about, this one right now, part 1, the official narrative that we're given in school And it's evolution, basically. We're pond scum. We evolved into what we are now. And I think if you're here right now, you don't believe that. But at the same time, there are people who may be tuning in, and we all know people who just kind of go with the flow. If this is what they've been taught, then that's what they're going to go with. I want to talk about how the media spins things to us and how maybe we ought to be a little bit more discerning instead of just taking everything they say. And what science maybe shows us that has spin on it as well. So everything has to be on the table. I firmly believe that. The existence of a creator has to be on the table. Now, I think you're probably beyond that point if you're here. You probably have wrestled with that at some point in the past because you need to. You need to start from the very beginning. So, discernment. And this is what John has to say about things. I'll read it off the board here. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are from Elohim. For many false prophets have gone forth into the world. The spirit of Elohim is known by this: every spirit which confesses that Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh from Yahweh, and every spirit which does not confess that Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh is not from Elohim. And this is the Antichrist, or the Anti-Messiah, which you heard is coming and is now already in the world. So this is one of the one of the many places I sort of handpicked some of the scriptures that tell us to be discerning. And this is to test the spirits. And if somebody is going to flatly deny that there is a God in heaven and that he has a son and a plan, well, maybe we ought to be a little suspect of what they have to say. Be a little bit discerning. Quote Mr. Capps, get out your thinking shovel. So, Philippians 1:9. And I pray that your love might extend more and more in knowledge and all discernment, for you to examine the matters that differ in order to be sincere and not stumbling until the day of Messiah. And Hebrews 5:14, which I want to examine a little bit more, says, but solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. And both of those words are from the Greek athesis. It's only used a few times in Scripture, but two of the really important verses about being discerning are from this word. And I thought that was kind of important because it means, and there's their definition on the bottom, cognition, thinking, discernment, moral discernment, something that we should be able to tell right from wrong, and ethical matters, which is more of the secular end of that, but it is telling right from wrong. So this is the idea, and this is what it all boils down to, is telling right from wrong. So, James, but if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask Elohim, who gives to all freely and with grace, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, doubting nothing. You know, there's a lot of these atheists, well, I asked God and he never showed up. Did you? Were you really open to it? Did you have that in mind, that he might actually answer you? He might actually give you some discernment. So ask it in faith, doubting nothing. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea being driven by wind and being tossed. But the natural man does not receive the matters of the Spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him, and he is unable to know them because they are spiritually discerned. This is kind of the crux of the matter. You need to be open to whether God's going to talk to you. And you have to test the spirits. That's really the whole key right here to this thing. If you want to let the natural man decide these things for you, you're going to fail every time. You have to be open to letting the Spirit work on you. What's the Hebrew word that Moses described himself? He was humble above all people. Remember that? And by his own admission, he was humble above all people. The Hebrew word anah. And this is what's used in Yom Kippur. We need to humble ourselves. We need to let go of all our pride, all our self. We need to admit all our mistakes. And I think that's the key to discernment. And I've heard it argued like this, that anah could be translated as teachable. Now think about that. If you're going to be humble, if you're going to be receptive, maybe you're teachable. I like that one. So here's the official narrative. We are all just pond scum. We evolved from nothing. And Kent Hovind used to say, from the zoo to you, or from goo to you by way of the zoo. Everybody remember hearing that? Yeah. He had a way with words. So I want to read you some quotes here, but first let's set the stage. How did it all begin? In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Or, in the beginning, there was nothing and then nothing exploded. Did anybody see the movie Expelled? No Intelligence Allowed. Ben Stein, he talks to Dawkins and some hardcore atheists, and he finally gets them to admit that this is what they think. In the beginning, there was nothing, then nothing exploded. So he says, in the beginning, there was nothing, then nothing exploded, and then we got everything. And he kind of had Dawkins because that's what he's arguing. So, Douglas Adams said, the story so far, in the beginning, the universe was created. And this has made a lot of people very angry and was widely regarded as a bad move. That's some people's worldview. They're just going to dismiss all of this. The argument's not even important. But it is if you have a biblical mindset. Okay, here's the quotes that I want to talk to you about. And the reason I'm bringing these up, and I've been collecting these for a while, some of these I've been thinking about for years, and they're from famous scientists and deep thinkers, and they let you in on what their actual worldview is. And most of it is naturalism, most of it is materialism. There is no room for a creator in their worldview. And these little offhand quips that they give, and some of them are well thought out, really give you a mindset of what they're thinking. And this is the official narrative. Okay. This is from, let's see. Okay, I don't remember who, Richard Lewitton. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. He's laying it all out for you. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes. And that means that's their basis. Their a priori commitment means their foundation is materialism. That's where they're coming from. To create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. This is how they all think, and this is what they're feeding us. And I'm not here to debate the merits of evolution. I mean, I think if you're here, you kind of know it's all crazy. But to maybe peel back the door a little bit and let you see, this is what they're thinking. Their conclusions are materialism because their starting point is materialism. It's naturalism. There has to be a natural explanation. There is no room for the divine foot in the door. Okay. This one is from George Walt. Man, I've been thinking about this one for 20 years. I even had this on my Facebook page at one time. There are only two possible explanations as to how life arose: spontaneous generation arising to evolution, or a supernatural creative act of God. There is no third possibility. Spontaneous generation was scientifically disproven 100 years ago by Louis Pasteur and others. This leads us to the only other conclusion, that life arose as a supernatural creative act of God. I will not accept that philosophically because I don't want to believe in God. They're totally tipping their hand here. Can't accept it because he doesn't want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible: spontaneous generation rising to evolution. He believes the impossible. What the Red Queen say? I can believe 6 impossible things before lunch. Out of Lewis Carroll's Looking Glass. There it is, writ large. Okay. Another one. This is from Arthur Eddington. Let's see, where was he from? He was an astrophysicist, and he said, philosophically, the notion of a beginning of the present order of nature is repugnant. The notion of a beginning is repugnant to me. I should like to find a genuine loophole. He's totally telling you what he wants. This one is from one of the guys who invented the X-ray process. We are convinced there is no supernatural element in the universe and that the scientific method is the only method of acquiring knowledge, an a priori presupposition again. And finally, Richard Dawkins, if there were no actual evidence in favor of the Darwinian theory, we should be justified in preferring it over all rival theories. If there's no evidence, we're still going to prefer this. That tells you all you need to know. And here's Thomas Nagel, who's more of a philosopher, not really a scientist, but he comments on science a lot. I want atheism to be true. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to look like that. Just let that resonate a little bit. Okay, so why do these parts keep falling out of my hammers? Because if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if that tool starts falling apart, perhaps it isn't even a hammer. This is called the golden hammer. It's a cognitive bias. And what I just sort of elucidated there, if you have a hammer, then you're going to pound everything with it. And these adjustable hammers, they don't work too good. Anyway, I think I sent this one to Mike here a few weeks ago. All right. I'm going to read you an entry on what creationism is from Wikipedia. And again, they're tipping their hand. Everybody knows that Wikipedia is publicly edited. Anybody can edit it at any time. And so it's always a war on Wikipedia to get your point of view put across. And it gets changed all the time. So anyway, what it looks like most of the time says this. Creationism is a religious belief that nature and aspects such as the universe, earth, life, and humans originated with supernatural acts of divine creation and is often pseudoscientific. In its broadest sense, creation includes religious views which differ in their acceptance or rejection of modern science concepts, such as evolution, that describe the origin or development of natural phenomena. The term creationism is most often referred to belief in a special creation, and he goes on and talks about the creation myth. So that tells you where their head is. And I wanted to give you these quotes and some of these definitions, and I've got one or two more to sort of set the stage. Look behind the curtain and see what's in these people's heads. They don't want there to be a God in heaven. They don't want to be responsible to him. This entry in Wikipedia is patronizing at best, and it's openly hostile at worst, like all of these quotes I just read you. Patronizing at best, hostile at worst. Okay, I was listening to the Weinsteins. Do you guys know who Eric and Brett Weinstein are? Somebody knows. Yeah. Anyway, Brett's an evolutionary biologist, and Eric is a Harvard-trained mathematician, both PhD level, very, very smart guys. And they've been on Rogan and a lot of podcasts, and I think this quote's from Rogan, spreading the good news of nihilism, of evolutionism. And this is kind of a reaction to another guest that he had on. Does anybody listen to Tucker Carlson? Yep. He's a believer. He makes no bones about his faith. And he was on last summer talking about evolution with Rogan. And he said, there's not a shred of evidence for it. And he's absolutely right about that. But the a priori commitment to a naturalistic explanation caused some of these guys to really get up in arms. And the Weinstein brothers, they realize that it is a bankrupt theory. And they tipped their hand here. And this is from, I think I've got Eric down as the byline, but it's actually Brett. I'm not happy with the state of Darwinism as it has been managed by modern Darwinists. In fact, I'm kind of annoyed by it. And although Tucker, and I don't believe he's right, in the end there's a reason that perspective that he was giving voice to is catching on. And I think it is catching on. And it has to do with the fact that, in my opinion, mainstream Darwinists are telling a kind of lie about how much we know and what remains to be understood. They realize there is not enough time and chance in the universe for us to arrive here from evolutionary means from pond scum. And that's only one of the problems. Now, both of these guys have said there has to be some sort of intermediate compiler to make all this work. And what they're doing is they're appealing to the supernatural, the same thing we're doing. So, by reporting that yes, Darwinism is true and we know how it works, and people who aren't compelled by the story are illiterate or ignorant or whatever, and they're pretending to know more than they do, so that all being said, let me say, I think modern Darwinism is broken. And this is from one of its biggest proponents. He realizes the problems with it. Now, this is those quotes that I told you about this commitment to naturalism and materialism. Realizing it's broken, realizing it doesn't work and it's bankrupt, and still being committed to it, doubling down on it. And I don't need to read the rest of that, but you get the idea. Okay, so what are all these guys telegraphing? All these really smart guys with PhDs and Nobel Prizes, some of them, what are they committing, or what are they telegraphing to you about themselves? Any ideas? Yeah, what I was looking for was pride. Yeah, they don't want there to be a God. They want there to be naturalistic means for everything and a naturalistic explanation, because that allows them to do what they want. So the more you think about it, the more the curtain gets pulled back and you see behind the scenes. Okay, 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 2. Now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisies, and having their conscience seared with a hot iron. If that doesn't describe what we're seeing, knowing that what you want to believe isn't true, but believing it anyway, and knowing that it's prideful, sounds to me like having your conscience seared with a hot iron. All right, we have a choice. We can believe this pablum, we can go along with it, we cannot think about it, or we can think about it. And I like what this version says. This is Yeshua's words. Yeshua therefore said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep, and all who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep do not hear them. So think about that. If you are one of his sheep, you won't hear this stuff. It'll just bounce right off you, because he's the door. He's the guardian. He's the filter. So if you belong to him, you're in good shape. But getting there is a whole other issue. A lot of people aren't there yet. Okay. Joshua 24:15, and this is, like I said, I cherry-picked some verses that really sort of try and reinforce these points. If it seems evil in your eyes to serve Yahweh, choose for yourselves this day whom you are going to serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served that were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But me and my house, we serve Yahweh. So if you are one of his sheep, you have made this choice. A lot of people haven't. A lot of people are on the fence. And that's why this narrative has legs. And that's why this a priori commitment to naturalism and materialism gets people to fall for it, because they haven't made that choice. All right, Romans 1:28. And even as they did not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim, Elohim gave them over to a worthless mind. If you want to believe these things and you have this prior commitment to naturalism and materialism, he will let you. Does that scare anybody? Yes. It should. Give them over to a worthless mind to do what is improper, having been filled with all unrighteousness, whoring, wickedness, greed, evil, filled with envy, murder, fighting, deceit, evil habits, whisperers, slanderers, haters of Elohim, insolent, proud, boasters. This is a pretty long list. Devisers of evil, disobedient to parents, without discernment, covenant breakers, unloving, unforgiving, ruthless. That just gives me chills. This is pretty comprehensive. He doesn't just say, you did some bad stuff. He's very explicit. You will be, if you want these things, he will give them to you, and none of them are good, and there's a lot of them, okay? And I'm gonna read you several verses that kind of go along with this idea. If you want to have a reprobate mind, he will give it to you. Isaiah 44, 14 through 19. Now, this is talking about idols, but when we start talking about the idols, that's where it really gets important. And I think this naturalism, this materialism is an idol, just like something you carved out of the forest. He cuts down cedars for himself. Half of it he burns in the fire. With this half he eats meat. He roasts a roast and is satisfied. He also warms himself and says, I'm warm, I have seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god. His carved image. He falls down before it and worships and prays to it and says, deliver me, for you are my God. So let's just think about this. You cut a tree down, you take part of it, and you make a fire, and you make lunch, and then you take another part of it, and you make an image. You make a god out of it, and you bow down to it. Is this really any different than Romans 1, worshiping the created instead of the creator? It's basically the same message. For he has smeared their eyes from seeing and their hearts from understanding, because they want that. Their knowledge nor understanding to say, I have burned half of it in the fire, and I've baked bread on its coals. I have roasted meat and eaten it, and I shall make the rest of it an abomination? Should I fall down before a log of wood? Well, these are good questions you should be asking. All right, Ezekiel 20:25. I gave them up to laws that were not good and right rulings which they would not live. If you want to have bad laws, if you want to be governed by naturalism and materialism and a godless mentality, he will let you. Psalm 81 says the same thing. I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it. But my people did not listen to my voice, and Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels. That just terrifies me. If you want to believe these crazy things, he'll let you. All right, 2 Thessalonians 2:7-11, and I'm just about the end of these verses. The mystery of lawlessness. It's already working until he who is now the obstacle is taken out of the way, and the lawless one will be exposed, with whom Master Yeshua will consume by the spirit of his mouth and will destroy by the brightness of his presence. Okay? Isaiah 11:4, his coming is due to the working of Satan in all power and miraculous signs and lying wonders, and in all deceit of unrighteousness in those who will perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. And because of this, Yahweh sends them a working of deception for them to believe the lie. If you want to believe a lie, he will let you. Who's heard of uniformitarianism? And I had a reason for putting this slide here, and I forgot what it was. But anyway, anybody ever heard of that word? Okay. This is the idea that all things continue now the way they always have. And Peter disproves this, and we'll talk about that. But I want to read you this definition. In geologic doctrine, suggesting the Earth's geologic processes acted in the same manner and with essentially the same intensity in the past as they do in the present, and such uniformity is sufficient to account for all geological change. Well, it has to be if you have a prior commitment to materialism. The principle is fundamental to geologic thinking and underlies the whole development of the science of geology. As geological phenomena become understandable in terms of advancing physics, chemistry, and biology, the reality of the principle of uniformity as major tenet of geology became established. The reality. They're tipping their hand again. I don't remember, I got this from Encyclopedia Britannica. There is a bias in all of this. Do you realize everybody has this? Everybody has a bias. We have a bias for a biblical worldview, and it's going to come out. No matter what we say, who we talk to, even if you try and be completely objective, it's never going to happen, because that's part of you. That's part of your DNA. If you have a naturalistic, materialistic interpretation of the world, it's going to come out. If you think that in the beginning God created, it's going to come out. So, and this is Peter's refutation of this idea. Knowing first that mockers shall come in the last days with mocking, walking according to their own lusts, saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all continues as from the beginning. For they choose to have this hidden from them. They choose. Again, this is a choice. That the heavens of old and the heavens standing out of the water and in the water by the word of Elohim. Through the world which at that time was destroyed, being flooded by water, and the present heavens and earth are treasured up by that same word, being kept for fire. So if you don't believe the world was flooded, How can you believe that there's coming a fiery destruction? You can't. It's not in your worldview at all. It's settled science. Okay, I want to show you this page. This is from the Institute for Creation Research. Has anybody ever heard of these guys? Okay. They do a lot of apologetics, and they will refute almost everybody. They do a lot of videos. They have seminars. They have webinars. I forgot the point I was trying to make here. But anyway, if there is a question, if there is something that is not clear about a biblical worldview, these guys have tackled it by and large. They got a backlog, a big catalog of their apologetics. I was watching one of their videos here the other day, and I don't remember even what it was about. And they made some reasonable points, refuting the evolutionary myth. And the amount of vitriol and hate in the comments surprised me. I didn't realize how entrenched this worldview was. People who have this materialist, naturalistic understanding of the world just do not want to hear that. They won't just shut it off. They're going to be vitriolic, and they're going to give it thumbs downs, and they're going to just spew hate. It's a spirit associated with this understanding. I'm convinced of that. Anyway. All right, this is what my dad used to say all the time. Check it out, you'll see. He had a photographic memory, so he was right. And a lot of times he wanted me to reflect on some things, and I thought I knew better. But when I did reflect on it, I found out that he had a photographic memory, and he was usually right about everything. But anyway, check things out for yourself. You need to test everything, and we'll get to that verse, which is right here. This is probably the one everybody's been thinking of. In everything, give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Messiah. Do not quench the spirit. Do not despise prophetic messages. Test all things and hold fast to what is good. This is where I think 119 Ministries got their name for the ministries right here. Test everything. And going with that is Acts 17:10. Being a Berean. As soon as it was night, the brothers sent Paul and Silas to Berea. Upon arrival, they made their way to a Jewish synagogue. Now, those were more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica because they received the message with goodwill, searching the scriptures to see whether these things were true. So, test everything, search the scriptures. If you lack wisdom, you lack understanding, ask for it, you will be given it. But give it, ask in faith. All right, I want to talk about the media a little bit. Who trusts the media? Yeah, if I would have asked in 1976, most of your hands would have gone up. And I have some statistics to kind of prove this out. But as the world goes on, people have changed, the media has changed. Who's seen this graphic? Anybody? This is, you got to look closely. Who are you going to believe, me or your lion eyes? And that's actually a quote from Chico Marx. A lot of people think it was Groucho, but Chico was playing Groucho, which is another story. Anyway, this is what, you look at this picture right here. Now, it looks like, and what it actually is the guy on the right's taking a knife and he's running after the guy on the left. And the guy on the left is trying to get away from him. However, look at the TV camera. Zoomed in on what's going on in that red circle, and it looks like the guy on the left is trying to put a knife into the guy on the right. And that's not at all what's happening, but that's what spin looks like. That's what a narrative looks like. I think I zoomed in on it right here. If you just looked at what's in the red circle, it looks like the guy on the left's trying to stab the guy on the right. So, forward the light brigade. Was there a man dismayed? No, the soldier knew. Some had blundered. Theirs not to make replay. Theirs not to reason why. Theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Now, Tennyson wrote that about the Crimean War, about a campaign that went bad. I think it was a cavalry got sent into an impossible mission, and I think they all died. But this idea of theirs is not to reason why, but to do and die. I had a college professor who used to tell us that all the time before a test or when things were hard. Yours is not to wonder why, yours is but to do and die. It was very comforting to hear those words right before a test. Anyway, this is spin. Just believe what I'm telling you. Don't think about it. Don't question it. And I like this meme right here. Good evening, it's 6 o'clock, and here's what we want you to think. Now, a lot of us aren't buying into this narrative nearly as much. Times have changed. People don't get their news from the TV set like they used to. Most of the time, people are getting the news off the internet, off social media. Young people really get their news off social media. And I've got some charts to kind of prove that out. I want to talk about a few more verses here. This is from Job. He may dispatch me, yet I will wait for him, yet I will plead my ways before his face. That's one version of 1350. And another way to translate this is, behold, he will cut me off. I will not wait, but I will justify my ways before his face. Now, depending on which version you read, you can either plead your case, you can fall down before him and ask for mercy, or you can have pride and you can try and justify yourself. And I was set up, I was wrong, I was framed. So it's all a worldview. Who started the 1619 Project? Yes, sir. Well, there's a lot of spin on this. Some of the important things about it is their idea is slavery is what founded America. And slavery is the most important thing to America. It's what made capitalism possible. And it's all preposterous. Yes, it happened, but it wasn't what made America work. Anyway, it was kind of a hit piece on the historical accuracy of the founding of America. I had some notes right here. Anyway, it's revisionist history, for lack of a better word. And so the reason I brought that up, this revisionist history, is because Jeremiah 16:19, it fits so well. I had to bring this up. Jeremiah 16:19, O Yahweh, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, surely our fathers have inherited lies and things which there is no profit. So if you're here now, you're probably waking up to this stuff. Most of America's waking up to this. There's a real polarization between the right and the left on whether they believe media, where they get their media, its veracity, its trustworthiness. And again, I'll go through some of these charts. But the 1619 Project just reminds me of Jeremiah 16:19. Okay, who started the Nuremberg defense? In the Nuremberg trials after World War II, the defense that a lot of these Russian collaborators, German collaborators and officers came up with is, I was just doing my job. I was just following orders. And turns out that's not going to get you off of a capital crime. And so a Nuremberg defense, I was just following orders, I was just doing what I was told, isn't going to hold water, especially in the media, in science. Got it going along to get along. I was doing what I had to do to get published. I was trying to get tenure, and this is what you've got to do that. That won't hold water. So it's a plea that a person, whether civilian or military, should not be considered guilty of committing crimes ordered by a superior officer. And again, that just doesn't work. Okay, bread and circuses. And this is from a Roman historian. I'm not sure. Anyway, the quote is actually this. Already long ago, from when we sold our vote to no man, the people have abdicated our duties. For people who once upon a time handed out military command, high civil office, legions, everything, now restrains itself and anxiously hopes for two things, bread and circuses. When things are getting tough, they're going to feed you bread and circuses. They're going to feed you the Super Bowl and the Grammys and the Oscars, and hope you don't notice that man behind the curtain. But we already pulled that curtain back a little bit. We know what their worldview is. So be aware. Misinformation and disinformation. Now, this is kind of where I was heading with this. Misinformation and disinformation are both not true. However, it seems to be a heart issue behind it. Misinformation is false information spread inadvertently without an intent to harm. A lot of the talking heads are just getting paid on TV. But, what are their editors thinking? What is the owner of the media corporation thinking? There's an agenda behind all that. Disinformation, false information that is designed to mislead others and deliberately spread with the intent to manipulate truth. And it's a heart issue, and Jeremiah says so. The heart is deceitful more than anything else, and it's disastrous. Who can understand it? I, Yahweh, examine the mind, I test the heart, and I give each one according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. And this goes right along with, if you want to be deceived, he will let you. If that's where you're going, he'll say, have at it. All right. This is an old Ace Reed comic, and this is real popular in ranching country where I came from. Oh, Sheriff, I sure am glad it's you. You can help us return my neighbor's cattle that some thief put in our pickup. How did that end up here? Believe it or not, cattle rustling actually still goes on in the Great Plains. So it's all how you spin it, though. Does somebody put this here? I had nothing to do with that. Most and least trusted news publications in America. What's the number one most trusted news publication in America? The Weather Channel. Yeah, isn't that unreal? Because the right and the left can both agree on that. And it's going to happen, and it's going to be vetted, because the weather's coming, and it's either going to be right or wrong. They have no interest in a political agenda. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. Okay. The rise of news influencers and where they can be found. So I talked about this before. Young people, you can see that second bar, that big one that says 37%. And these would be your Zoomers and late millennials. Where do they get their news? Social media, almost 40% of them. X, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We look over clear on the right-hand side. We get into the Xers and the Boomers, and just a very few of us get our news there. So the demographic is changing, and trust in media is changing as well. Trust in media reaches new lows. Shares the U.S. respondents by level of trust in mass media. Okay, so if you start on the blue line, great deal or fair amount of trust in the mass media, and just 20 years ago, over half of all people had a lot of trust in the media. And so that has gradually declined, and the people who have no trust in media at all started out very low, and it has gotten higher. Those two lines crossed, they inverted, which should tell you something. People who have a great deal of trust has gone down. People who have no trust at all has started to go up, and those lines merged. It's where we're headed. People are seeing this. People are understanding the media. The official narrative has some issues with it. America's trust in mass media, this is another, I think this is from Gallup, and the ones I showed you before are from Statista. Anyway, in general, how much trust and confidence do you have in the mass media, such as newspapers, radio, TV? This is what I alluded to earlier. Look clear on the left-hand side. In 1972, 70% of Americans trusted everything they were seeing and reading. Walter Cronkite, he was totally trustworthy. Some of these other guys, they were institutions. You grew up and the nightly news was on. Tom Brokaw, he was very trustworthy. And that has slowly devolved into the point where it's cut in half basically now. Okay. Republicans have no trust in mass media. Now, you can see the blue line at the very bottom, that's the Democrats. They started out very low, less than 10%, and pretty well stayed there. But as time goes on, in the last 20 years, and this is a little bit of a dated chart, Republicans have started out with very little trust, or it's trust about 20%, and their trust is gone down to about 60% of them don't believe anything that they read or see. All right, and this is from Mark Twain. 3 kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. And that's true. I had a statistics class in college, and my professor purposely wanted us to skew data, to demonstrate how this can be that you can take the same data set and make it say whatever you want. I've got a graph right here. Look at this graph, and this is pretty well a static line. Goes down a little bit from about the low 30s into the low 20s. Americans' ratings of news professionals' honesty and ethics. So if you were to look at this, we would conclude that Americans have slightly lowered their expectations and their trust in the ethics of news professionals. But if we just simply squeeze this graph in, it looks like it goes down a lot more. Look at that on the very end. It looks like it drops off a cliff in about 2020, goes down dramatically. It's the same chart, but it's just been squeezed in. You can take data points, and instead of having a wide range, you can narrow the range, and that'll make the data look completely different than if it's on a chart with a lot of range to it. So just be aware that the statistics can be manipulated very, very easily. Trust the science. Well, we've heard this one. Imagine science so good that the head scientist has to receive a pardon. Imagine science so good that drug companies can't be sued. Are you looking behind the curtain a little bit? Okay. Questioning science is how you do science, says Batman. So we don't just blindly follow along. Even Batman knows that. Has trust in science become a partisan issue? Number or percentage of respondents having a lot of trust in scientists to do what is right for the public by political leaning. Okay, now the most Republicans in developed countries, Canada, the US, low degree of trust in scientists. 35 in Canada, 20% in the US, UK, Germany, right around that a third of respondents. However, almost 2/3 of those on the left absolutely believe the science. It's a hard issue. It's a spirit that we need to test. America's trust in science and scientists has dropped since the start of the COVID pandemic, according to a report from Pew Research. Percent of American adults who say science has a mostly positive effect on society fell down to 57%, down 8 percentage points since November 21, and 16 points since just before the pandemic, according to the survey of more than 8,800 adults, going downhill dramatically. I was reading just in the last week articles, and I put this stuff together a few weeks ago, just trying to think of this, if there's a pattern here, and collect these things. In the last couple of days, I've seen articles about the precipitous drop coming off a cliff of Americans' trust in science. And maybe it's because we've got a new administration, who knows. Maybe it's because we've petitioned the Father for some insight and wisdom, but it's a real thing, and it's happening. All right. Liz Warren and her sponsors in her race suit, Pfizer, Moderna. I'm probably getting political here, and I shouldn't be. But anyway, here's what I want to point out. Remember the confirmation hearings when RFK was being grilled? And anyway, she asked him point blank if he would, I'll get her words right here, if he is to make commitments that he would not seek to profit off drug companies or lawsuits related to them after working in the Trump administration. And Liz Warren took $5 million on her run for president from Pfizer, Moderna, all these pharmaceutical companies. RFK told her, I'm happy to commit to that. I don't think any of them want to give me money. So I mean, it's pretty obvious that if you're bought off, you're bought off, and you can't see the truth. Anyway, 7% of scientists agree with whoever's funding them. I talked about this a little bit before. If you want to get tenure in an institution, if you want to get published, if you want to get a grant, none of that is going to happen by bucking the system. You know, once in a while, a peer-reviewed article gets through because the science is just so undeniable. Most of the time, though, if you want to advance in the STEM fields, in academia, you have to play the game. You can't go off on a limb and start calling truth what it is, truth. All right, I got a couple cartoons for you here. So they're telling us that we need to save the planet, and Greta Thunberg is saying that we have to start eating bugs and we have to quit farming and quit having cattle and agriculture. And the TV told me that if I eat bugs and pay more money to the government, the weather will be gooder. So if you're not going to think about this and just do what you're told, that might be the conclusion you come to. Stated a different way, eating bugs stops the weather. So this is a mindset. There are people who believe this. Does that scare anybody? Yeah, good. Now, I got this quote from the Amplified Bible, and I like the way it puts it. Surely I am too brutish and stupid to be called a man, and I have not the understanding of a man, for all my secular learning is as nothing. Love the way they put that. I have not learned skillful and godly wisdom, that I should have the knowledge or burden of the Holy One. And then Proverbs 30 and 4. Who has ascended into the heavens and come down? Who has gathered the wind in the hollow of his hand? Who has wrapped water in a garment? Who has established the ends of the earth? What is his name, and what is the name of his son? For surely you know. For surely you know, because everything came from nothing, and nothing exploded and formed everything. And where ponds come, you must know all this stuff. I love that, the irony of that question. The definition of science: the careful study of the structure and behavior of the physical world, especially by watching, measuring, doing experiments, and the development of theories to describe the results. It is testable, it is observable, and is repeatable. And if they start extrapolating about, well, how this must have been in the ancient past, there's another tell. Look behind the curtain. That's their worldview. It violates Peter when he says that the world is not uniformitarianism. Any system of knowledge that is concerned with the physical world and its phenomena, that entails unbiased observations and systematic experimentation in general in science, involves a pursuit of knowledge covering general truths or the operation of fundamental laws. So again, testable, observable, repeatable. Let's see. The scientific method, on the other hand, involves careful observation coupled with a rigorous skepticism, because cognitive assumptions can distort the interpretation of the observation. Scientific inquiry includes creating a testable hypothesis through inductive reasoning, testing it through experiments, and statistical analysis. Rigorously looking at these things, not thinking, well, this must have been true all the time. This uniformitarianism is how things must be. Who knows where Spirit Lake is? Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. When Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, Spirit Lake got filled with logs. There was a log mat that covered the whole thing. And as time went by, they started sinking. And they started sinking in an upright position. And we see this in the geological column all over the place. And, secular reasoning, materialism, naturalism would have you believe that, well, they just started getting silted in there. Well, we saw it happen. There were canyons cut into pyroclastic flows after they cooled. And it looks exactly like the Grand Canyon, about a 1/20th scale. We have a catastrophism model in St. Helens that perfectly explains everything we see in the geologic record, but it's too convenient. We don't want to look at that one. So, extrapolation. We can't just say that the current conditions are the only thing that can explain life in the universe and everything. Extrapolation is a type of estimation beyond the original observation range. And what is science? Again, it's testable, it's observable, it's repeatable. Of the value of a variable on the basis of its relationship with another variable, similar to interpolation, which produces estimates between known observations. But extrapolation is subject to greater uncertainty and a higher risk of producing meaningless results. You think the conditions that we see now have always been here. Well, we have no idea if that's true. It's not testable, observable, or repeatable. Okay. So that leads us to Genesis 11. And Yahweh said, behold, they're one people with one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. So now nothing they intend to do will be impossible for them. I think science is on that path. Nothing will be impossible for them. But where is that going to get you without a creator in the picture? He shut it all down once. Think he can't do it again? All right. We lied about everything last time, but this time you can trust the science. So yeah, our track record's not so good, but this time it's going to be okay. So questioning the narrative equals discernment. And Proverbs says, the first to state his case seems right until another one comes along and examines him. Hebrews 5:14, I read this one earlier, but this is a different interpretation of it, a different Bible I got this from. Solid food belongs to the mature who, due to practice, have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. I like the way he puts that. Solid food, you train yourself to distinguish these things. Okay, so what do we take away from this? This is a quote from William Penn. Those who will not be governed by God will be governed by tyrants or be ruled by tyrants. And Penn was an interesting character, and you probably know this. He was a proponent of religious primitivism. Anybody ever heard of that? It's the idea that we should be doing things in our churches, in our study, the same way they did it in the first century. And so he was really a proponent of going back to the first century model. I think in another timeline, in another world, he'd been sitting with us right here today. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. All right. So take everything you hear, everything you see, everything that the media is telling you, that science is telling you, with a grain of salt. And the story behind this is kind of fascinating. I don't remember what, it was a Roman historian that wrote this. And it was in response to a formula for an antidote to poison. And he was saying, the guy who wrote this antidote to poison, you put all these ingredients in there and then you put a little pinch of salt in there. And the idea is, if this pinch of salt is gonna make the difference, I'm highly skeptical. So be skeptical of things. This little pinch of salt probably isn't gonna save you from destruction. So I'm gonna leave you with one more quote right here, and this is from Lincoln. And he said a lot of pithy things, a lot of quote-worthy things, but one of the things that Lincoln says that I think is probably the most interesting and the most apropos to what we're at right now is this: don't believe everything you read on the internet. That's all I have. If you want to ask me questions, I will do my best. Oh. We have a mic up here. Oh, okay.
Can I say a couple things?
Absolutely. Have at it.
Well, my brain was overtaxed today, but while you were talking, it was going. Anyway, so a couple of verses, a verse came to mind when you were discussing, with science and, the media and all these different ways of spreading what I would say is disinformation at this point.
Yeah.
There's a passage in Daniel, and a lot of people believe it's referring to the anti-Messiah, but that it says he casts truth to the ground.
Wish I'd thought of that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But just think about that in light of what you're talking here. What you're saying is that this is, the goal. If that is talking about the anti-Messiah, then one of his primary methods, I would say, because the spirit of Antichrist is deny that, there is a God and that he has sent his son, right? That is the core of the spirit of anti-Messiah. And so it says he casts truth to the ground. And so, in my mind, we're not talking about people who are maybe susceptible to misinformation necessarily, but the people who are disseminating disinformation.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing. They're casting truth
Yeah.
to the ground, right?
Absolutely.
Which is following or is, emulating the attributes of the anti-Messiah. It is the spirit of Antichrist. And so these people that are doing these things really are exhibiting the spirit of Antichrist.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right? So that was one thing that was on my mind. I mean, like I said, my brain was kind of firing all over the place. I mean, just the fact that, and I'm not trying to be political here either, but if you watched the president's address last night, and particularly when he made mention of the fact that, and I'm going to paraphrase, we're through with this nonsense. There are two genders. It's a male and it's a female. And you had one side applauding, and you had another side holding up these little cards that says, that's a lie, that's false, and, all these other little things like that. And I wanted to,
Filter.
I really do hope that people are waking up that, there's all these things that are going on. And the thought that come to mind was the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's time for people to say, look, this guy's in his underwear, which then led me to this thought, and I'll hand the mic off to somebody else. If, as you're describing here for us tonight, that more and more and more people are waking up to the fact that they've been fed all these different lies and misinformation, disinformation, a complete lack of trust of media and science and all these kinds of things. Because the science, they're wanting me to believe that the science proves that there are multiple genders. Follow the science, right?
Yeah.
And so, no, I can't trust that. And so if people are waking up to that, and here's my point, if there is this vacuum right now, then that's an opportunity for the people of God to stand up, to speak up, and to declare the truth, and to fill that void where people are, they're not believing all these things they've been told all these many decades now. For us to declare the truth, because I believe that there is a truth-shaped vacuum in the spirit of every man. And when you hear truth, it resonates within you. I realize that there are people that you described, that don't want to believe that there's a God. They don't want to believe that. And they're what was the passage from Timothy? Their conscience has been seared with like a hot iron. Right. That's really to say they're cauterized, right?
Yep.
And I understand that to be cauterized means it has no feeling anymore. It has no sense of feel. So there are those people like that, but I believe there's a lot more people who just don't know. And if we are prepared and equipped with the truth and declare that truth, there's a lot of people out there, I think, that are ready to receive it.
Yeah, man, that's wise counsel. Very well said, Bill. Thank you.
All righty. Who wants to carry the microphone around? Elijah, you said you did? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share?
I was kind of struck by the divide just watching that address. Both sides of the aisle. Once in a while, you get somebody from each side to stand up. So whoever's in power, somebody on the other side of the aisle will clap. That didn't happen. The polarization in this country is unbelievable. I mean, when I was a kid, they might not have liked each other, but they could get some things done. Not anymore. Anyway, where are we at?
Hey.
Yeah, hi.
This was great. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Cauterized. As a nurse, I learned back when I went through nursing school, when something is cauterized, it's really interesting. Nothing can get in and nothing can get out. It's completely sealed. It's like dead, no feeling, but it just made me think, the Word of God is a seed. Nothing can be planted there anymore. Nothing's getting in and nothing's coming out. It's cauterized, sealed, completely. I thought that was interesting. But I had a question about the scriptures. You brought up a couple, and they're very sobering about, is if it were possible the elect could be deceived, or is it the elect can be deceived? I also had a question about that scripture.
Well, if it were possible, the very elect could be deceived. It's in the Olivet Prophecies, Matthew 24. I'd have to look it up, but yeah, I don't have that address on the top of my head. But yeah, if it were possible, that's what most versions say. See if I can find it right here real quick. But you were just asking the veracity of that, if that's how it is indeed phrased.
Yeah, because it's very sobering, like you said. It reminded me of the teaching a couple of months back about the sons of Korah and how they were standing on the edge, but by God's grace they came to their senses, you know. And if it were possible, and the times that we're living in, and then that vacuum that was just mentioned about how we've got an opportunity now. May God give us the grace and the words to come out in our workplaces and in the grocery stores and out there to hear conversations and to make eye contact and to engage with the people around us that are put in our path, to, who knows, to plant a seed to the people who aren't cauterized, to the people who aren't dead, you know, to bring them in. I really enjoyed this. I was really tired and I was getting really relaxed, but I perked up because this was interesting and engaging, so.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I never know if I'm
you.
connecting with anybody. Appreciate that. I'm not finding it. Does anybody know where that is? Yeah, okay. Good enough, good enough. So one translation of that passage said, their consciences have been seared with a branding iron. Well, I come from cattle country. I raised cattle all my life, and that's one of the things we did. We branded calves in the spring. Let me tell you, that's painful, though. And I have firsthand experience with that aspect of it. And I can tell you that's something you're not going to forget. That it leaves a mark that's there for the rest of your life. So, who's next? Well, this is your opportunity to tell me what I got wrong, which I probably got some things wrong. Or we could call it a day. You don't have anything, Stephen?
Where does the white go when the snow melts?
I don't know. I have to ask a philosopher. Yeah. All right.
Hello?
Oh, yeah. All right. Yes, ma'am.
I thought it was interesting. You were talking about that people weren't getting, that the truth wasn't getting posted in journals or whatever. And I remember, like, I was doing, like, nursing school online during COVID and everything. And so everyone, like, when we post, everyone was all pro vaccine and pro all that stuff at the time. And when I would try, like, if I was looking up anything, I can find practically anything. I can find, you know, for instance, one person will say eggs are good for you and one person will say eggs are bad for you. You can pretty much find the opposite on everything. You can find the opposing of any study. You can find study, like you were saying. But during that time, I could not find anything on the other side of the COVID thing. So I would have to use whatever was posted by them, their own numbers, to show the other side of it. Now, there are some articles showing statistics on the other side, but they all include, but you should still get vaccinated.
Yeah.
But we recommend you get vaccinated. So I just think it's interesting. As long as they add those words, you know what I'm saying, to kind of act like they're still agreeing on the other side, they can go ahead and post something that's opposing. As far as, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I wasn't really trying to make a judgment call one way or the other. Just, you need to think, you need to wake up. Don't just accept things the way they are, you know. And you might come to a different conclusion than I do, but don't let it be because you haven't thought about it.
Well, But for the information not to even be there, I thought was interesting that they weren't even allowing an opposing viewpoint, because
Oh, yeah.
we can sit here all day and people can disagree and we can still, oh, well, that's interesting, you know what I'm saying? And to be able to bring up topics and throw it around and everything, and not, like you're saying, the polarization. It used to be people could disagree on something and still shake hands and everything. But the polarization might be good because it definitely identifies who's who. There's no murky waters anymore. It's one or the other, where, before it could be kind of hidden more. I don't know. I just think that's interesting as well.
In some respect, gridlock's a good thing because they don't do any damage. If they can't agree on something, then they won't pass anything, and maybe we're better off that way. So, I don't know. But, I'll just tell you flat out, I'm very happy with the political climate right now. So. Anybody else? Oh, over here.
Is the polling rank?
Yes, sir.
So, going along with those scripture verses where it says he'll give them over to delusion, do you think possibly along those same lines, that's why people go in depth in rabbit trails and get confused when they try to study scriptures? The fear in their mind and delusions of what isn't really there that they're reading into, he's letting them see because they're not really based in the truth.
Well, I guess my opinion is people conflate knowledge with wisdom. They're not the same thing. They think if we know a lot of stuff, if I study all the time, then I'll have enough wisdom to discern these things. Well, that comes from the Spirit. You need to ask for that. You need to have some knowledge. You need to, read these things and understand them. But does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there's always discernment in that. I just wondered, if their fear of not knowing or their fear of distrust is he's giving them over to that delusion to confuse their mind, and so they go down these rabbit trails believing in things like flat earth, and then they start disseminating the writings of Paul, and then they just start disseminating the Messiah, and they just start down these trails of destruction because I feel like he's just giving them over to it.
Well, once you realize you've been lied to about something, you want to know how deep that rabbit hole goes. And it's easy to go off the rails heading down the rabbit hole. You can fall from one ditch clear into the other one instead of getting back on the road.
Right.
I don't know. Thank you, Kyle. Yes, sir.
If I may.
Absolutely.
Well, just kind of springboarding off what Kyle just asked. Let's go back to the beginning. What led to the fall of man? It boils down to this: wanting to know everything God knows.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, God knows that if you eat of this tree, you'll be like him, know good from evil. And so that was part of the temptation and the seduction, to know all the things that God knows.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes our pursuit of knowledge, and I like the way you said that, we conflate knowledge with wisdom. Wisdom would have said, let's defer to what God said originally and leave this alone. But the pursuit of knowledge is what led to, the fall of man. And at least that's the way I see it. So then, going back to your original thought or point, the need for discernment, because in the last days, what is it going to be the greatest threat to us in terms of the body and what we're supposed to be doing? It's going to be deception, being deceived. If it were possible, even the very elect could be deceived. So, when Yeshua in Matthew chapter 24 starts talking about all the things that we need to be on the lookout for, he doesn't start out with, black helicopters and, and all the other stuff. He starts out with, take heed that no one deceives you, right?
Right.
So that's very important, and that then accentuates not just the need, but the absolute must of having discernment
Yeah.
in these last days.
Oh yeah, and that's one reason I wanted to talk about this stuff. I think it's becoming more important than ever because of the times I think we're living in. You know, it's more important for us to have this deception. And you know, if I do a second part on this, I think it has to do with AI and the internet and the indistinguishability of reality right now. So
Okay, so I wanted to tag on to a little bit onto this too. First of all, thank you so much for what you brought out. It's so important. You know, where the media is concerned, you don't know who you can believe anymore. So we do need to do our homework, and we do need to discern.
yeah,
But I think even more so, we need to be discerning on the day-to-day in, you know, with the people that we walk among every day.
yeah,
And so that deception is not only happening when you read the media. You need to be discerning about what you listen to every day, and not just in the media, but in your church maybe, what somebody tells you, or what you listen to what somebody, you know, says. I told Bill, you know, a little scenario. We hear different things from time to time that, you know, people come and say, oh, well, we were told that you said this, or we were told that you did this at Jacob's tent as the leaders. And I just laugh and just say, well, no, that's not true. You know, who told you that? Sometimes they'll tell you and sometimes they won't. But what I would like to do, and I know the person who has told this story, is make up some fantastical thing and go to them and say, I was told that you did crazy stuff, you know, and they look at me and go, well, that's not true at all. Where did you hear that? And I'd say, well, from the same person that you believe the story about me, but at least I came to you to ask and find out if it was true.
right.
And that's what we need to do. We don't just believe everything just because somebody you love or know has said it.
Yep.
You can't just trust that. It's not fair. You take it to the source. Did you really say this? Did you really do this? Ask the questions. You said it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got out with your brother, take it up with him. You know?
Well, that you said the discernment is tied to the idea of asking questions, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Seeking these things
Yeah.
out to see if these things are true, which teaches us to discern between good and evil.
Yeah.
So,
It's our fault if we don't.
right.
Yeah, and without, you know, the Spirit guiding you, those quotes from all those scientists, they're never going to come to that truth with that attitude. And that's the thing that just is burr under my blanket. You know, if you're beginning, your a priori commitment is to a naturalistic means, you cannot see anything else. It's impossible. So we got one on the board here. At Uday says, how can discernment help individuals differentiate between truth and deception, especially when the enemy's deception is often very close to the truth, making it harder and harder to recognize? Well, I think those are the days we're coming into, especially on all things electronic, on the internet, on television, any sort of media. It's indistinguishable. You can't tell. AI passed the Turing test about 3 years ago, and everybody knows what that is. You cannot tell if you're talking to a real human being or a computer. It's gotten that good. And that was with ChatGPT 3.5, something like that. Well, they've got version 5 and version 6, I think, is in the works right now. So it's exponentially getting smaller. The deception, if it were possible for the very elect, I think it's here. So I don't know if that answered your question at all. The answer is, I don't know. You know, just pray for discernment. Ask the Father to show you. He will. But I mean, unless we're on guard all the time, it's easy to get fooled. It's easy to get sucked into this narrative. Do we have another one? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is about deceive in the last days. So I went to Walmart to buy some material, and the lady that is cutting the material and you know, things like that. So sometimes I just know there's some divine appointments that just set for me without me knowing. So, you know, we're talking, I'm like, you know, she said, she has this cross on that was given to her. And inside the cross, there is a mustard seed, or was it a wood? Yes, it was a piece of wood that was acacia wood, I believe. She said that was in there. And I was like, really? That's so nice. She says it helps her to calm down, and she enjoys having it. And I'm like, oh, okay, because we're talking about God afterwards, because it comes up. So next thing you know, all she had to say to me was, yeah, this Buddhist guy gave it to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So someone's walking around giving things out who are, yeah. So I was like, here's my opportunity. Because I was just like, God is good, faithful all the time. Mm-hmm. And so because of her anxiousness or whatever she's going on with that makes her think she feels better, I said, would you like me to pray with you? And she's like, yes. And I was like, thank you. But just knowing that this is deceivement, the things that, people are they just believe, or just because the cross, or just because someone says the acacia wood or mustard seeds in it, they just believe and they just think that, it's cool. But when I heard that, I just was like, I need to pray. And she accepted the prayer. And there's this other dude that is walking around giving out crosses in the store. And he goes, did I get you a cross? And I'm like, no. So he's like giving it to me, and so I was standing there and I put it down somewhere. But the whole thing I thought about was, you're giving me a cross. You're not even asking me, do I believe? You're giving me a cross, and then you just walk away. What is the cross for? Did you explain to me why the cross is? What did what is this? Why are you giving it to me? So I just thought about deception, and the enemy is going to use Yeshua to get people to fall for things. And that's what he's using in the last days, because people will believe anything just because Jesus is attached to it, or Jerusalem, or different things. So I'm just like, be on guard and be ready to pray and seek the Lord for other people, because that was just a timing that I thought was, hey, I got to go get me some scarf or something. So just want to put it out there. It's
well,
getting
thank
crazy.
you. Yeah, I think that goes right with what Bill said. There's an opportunity here. As the days get darker and people are questioning the narrative, well, it's an opportunity for us to fill the void, and say, well, let me tell you about this God in heaven, this unknown God. Excuse me, to paraphrase Paul. So it sounds like you've had that opportunity to fill the void, and I think maybe that's where we're headed. So thank you, Miss Green. We got one on the board here. Comment for John. There's a song lyric from John Mayer that applies here. And when you trust your television, got it. What you get is what you got. When they own the information, they can bend it all the way they want. Yeah, that's very well said. Appreciate that. If there's not anybody else, we could probably, do I see a hand anywhere? Okay. It's 8:28, so unless anybody's got a question, we'll call it for tonight. Well, I guess we got a question here. Shalom, do you think that the majority of people following a group of people rather than following the truth? Well, I think there's something to that. We're tribal. We follow our tribe. And if our tribe has a narrative that is fundamental to their identity, we're going to buy into that until, or if it comes a point where we can't tolerate it anymore because we know it's not true. You think about that. We have to have people. People need people. And we are tribal, and since we don't have a tribal system anymore, we find, other ranchers or IT guys or people who like music or whatever. or people who believe the same way. And that's our tribe, and we need that. And so if you start studying, you can brush these things under the rug. You can pretend to yourself that there's nothing to it, if and until there comes a point where there's critical mass and you can't believe the lie anymore. And then you have to give up your tribe, and that's the whole problem, because you got to go find new people. And that's not easy, and I hope that resonates. Well, if there's nobody else here, does somebody want to pray for it? Do you guys have anything?
Well, let's just thank John for sharing with us tonight, first of all. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Don't go anywhere.
All right. Here I am.
I'll let you dismiss us in prayer, but I did want to say one last thing that, like I said, you said a few things that got my brain buzzing. But I know it's kind of a play on words, but kind of, setting it up for when you share some more in the future. When Israel went into the land after the victory at Jericho, does anybody remember what happened next?
Aye.
Yeah, they lost the battle of Ai.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because Achan got his eyes on something that that lured him away from what he knew to be the truth. And so I think I know it's a play on words, but sometimes I think the Father is speaking very, very subtly if we'll pay attention, and discern what he's trying to say through these things. So, all right?
Amen. Thank you.
All right. Well, as far as that goes, why don't you just dismiss us in prayer, and we'll call it an evening.
All right. If you want to stand, we'll talk to the Father. Abba Yahweh, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and please let my words have been your words. I only want to glorify you. Thank you for giving me these thoughts. I love to think about your word. I love to meditate daily, and when I get a chance to share, appreciate that. In the name of your Son, Yeshua, thank you for everything. Amen.
And everybody be safe going home. Drive carefully. Stay warm. Pray for one another, and let's encourage one another. Amen.